My name is Xavier. I'm 32 years old, and I never thought a single piece of paper could shatter my world. While searching for insurance documents in my parents' desk drawer, I discovered their will. The shock of seeing everything left to my younger brother Logan paralyzed me. For years, I'd paid their mortgage, covered medical bills, and sacrificed career opportunities to stay close. The betrayal cut deep. After a month of silence and withdrawn support, Mom texted me about the mortgage. Before I tell you how I responded to my mother's text, let me know where you're watching from. And hit subscribe to follow the journey of how I reclaimed my self-respect. I grew up in a modest brick house in the suburbs of Chicago. It wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable with 4 bedrooms, a small backyard where Dad would grill on weekends, and a kitchen where Mom would bake cookies that filled the house with warmth. The neighborhood was safe, filled with similar middle-class families, with good schools and community parks. It was the perfect American middle-class dream that my parents, Richard and Margaret, had built over decades of hard work. At 32, I had built a successful career as a software engineer at one of the major tech companies. After graduating with honors and working my way up, I now commanded a 6-figure salary that many would envy. I had always been the responsible one, the son who planned ahead, saved diligently, and made practical decisions. My apartment was modest compared to what I could afford, my car reliable, but not flashy. I preferred to use my resources to secure my future and help my family. My relationship with my parents had always been strong. Dad, now 67, had worked as a high school physics teacher for 35 years before retiring. A tall man with silver hair and reading glasses perpetually perched on his nose. He instilled in me a love for problem-solving and analytical thinking. Mom, 65, had been an administrative assistant at a local law firm. She was warm, nurturing, always ready with advice or a home-cooked meal when I visited. I called them at least twice a week and visited every Sunday for dinner. My brother Logan couldn't be more different from me. At 28, he still hadn't found his calling, as he liked to put it. He'd bounce between jobs, never lasting more than a few months at any position. One month he'd be waiting tables, the next helping a friend with a startup that inevitably failed. He lived in a rented room in a house with 3 roommates, drove a beat-up car that broke down regularly, and often borrowed money with vague promises to pay it back. Despite his flaws, he had a charm about him that made people forgive his irresponsibility. My parents especially seemed blind to his shortcomings, always making excuses for him. Jessica, my 30-year-old sister, was the middle ground between Logan and me. She worked as an elementary school teacher, passionate about her job, but not exactly in a lucrative profession. She lived within her means in a small apartment, drove a sensible car, and rarely asked for help. She was the peacemaker in the family, the one who could see all sides of an argument. Jessica was the only one who truly seemed to understand me, appreciating my responsible nature rather than taking it for granted. My financial support for my parents began gradually after my father's heart attack 5 years ago. The medical bills piled up despite their insurance, and I stepped in without hesitation. What started as helping with unexpected medical expenses evolved into regular financial assistance. I took over most of their monthly mortgage payment, contributing $1,200 of the $1,500 total. The medical bills continued long after Dad recovered, with medications, checkups, and specialists costing around $700 monthly that insurance didn't cover. Last year, when their roof started leaking, I paid $15,000 for a complete replacement, rather than letting them go into debt for repairs. When their 40th wedding anniversary approached, I surprised them with a 2-week cruise to Alaska, something they had always dreamed of, but could never afford on their own. These weren't small contributions for me, even with my salary. They represented sacrifices and careful planning on my part. Our Sunday dinners became a family tradition. I would arrive around 4 in the afternoon, often bringing dessert or a bottle of wine. Mom would have spent the day preparing my favorite dishes, and Dad would regale us with stories from his teaching days or the latest book he was reading. Logan would sometimes show up, sometimes not, depending on his mood and schedule. Jessica was more reliable, arriving with small gifts like flowers for Mom or a magazine Dad would enjoy. These gatherings anchored my week, providing the family connection I valued. Thanksgiving was always special in our family. Mom would spend days preparing, and I would take time off work to help. I'd drive them to pick up a fresh turkey from a farm outside the city, help Dad set up the extra table leaves to accommodate extended family, and assist Mom with the more complicated dishes. It was during these moments that I felt most connected to my roots, most certain that the sacrifices I made for my family were worth it. 3 years ago, I was offered a management position at our company's headquarters in San Francisco. The salary bump would have been significant, around 40% more than I was making. The opportunity for advancement was substantial, and the location exciting. But the thought of moving so far from my parents, especially with Dad's health concerns, made me decline. My boss was shocked. My colleagues thought I was crazy. But my family came first. I believed my parents understood and appreciated this sacrifice. I always operated under the assumption that my devotion to family was recognized and valued. When friends asked why I didn't buy my own home instead of renting, I explained that helping my parents maintain their house took priority. When colleagues wondered why I took on extra freelance work despite my good salary, I said it was to ensure my father received the best medical care possible. I never complained or made my parents feel like a burden. This was simply what a good son did, and I took pride in being that son. The thought that my parents might not value these contributions never crossed my mind. I believed we had an unspoken understanding. I supported them financially, and they appreciated my dedication. Looking back, I realize I never actually confirmed this assumption. I never asked for acknowledgement or gratitude. I simply gave, expecting that my role in the family was understood and respected. It was an ordinary Sunday when my life changed forever. The mid-October air had that crisp feel that signals the true arrival of fall in Chicago. I arrived at my parents' house around 3 in the afternoon, earlier than usual because Mom had asked me to bring some files from my apartment that they needed for tax purposes. I also brought containers of homemade chili that I'd spent the morning preparing, knowing it was Dad's favorite as the weather turned colder. The house looked the same as always, the familiar creak of the third porch step greeting me as I made my way to the front door. Mom answered with her usual warm smile and hug, taking the food to the kitchen while Dad called out greetings from his recliner in the living room. Everything felt normal, comfortable in its predictability. After settling in and catching up for a bit, Mom mentioned she needed help finding some insurance paperwork for their car. "The premium seems higher than it should be," she explained. "I want to compare it with last year's policy, but I can't find the documents. Would you mind checking the file cabinet in the office?" Second drawer, under insurance. "You've always been better at organizing than me." I headed to the small room they called the office, really just a converted bedroom with a desk, computer, and filing cabinet. I found the drawer Mom indicated and began searching through the neatly labeled folders. Car insurance, home insurance, health insurance. They were all there in alphabetical order. As I pulled out the car insurance folder, my hand brushed against another file labeled Wills and Trusts. I don't know why I opened it. Curiosity, perhaps, or just the natural inclination to organize information. Inside were several documents, including a thick document in a blue legal folder. The title page read, Last Will and Testament of Richard and Margaret Anderson. The date caught my eye immediately. It had been updated just 3 months ago. The document looked official, with notary stamps and signatures on the appropriate lines. Without really thinking about the implications, I began to read. The legal language was dense, but certain phrases jumped out with painful clarity. Being of sound mind and memory. Hereby declare this to be our last will and testament. Revoke all former wills and codicils. All of our property, real, personal, and mixed, of whatever kind and wherever located, including our primary residence, all financial accounts, investments, and personal property, we give, devise, and bequeath to our son, Logan Anderson. My hands began to tremble. I read the passage again. Sure, I had misunderstood something, but the words remained unchanged. Everything, literally everything, would go to Logan. There was a small mention of personal items that could be distributed as Jessica and I chose, but all assets of monetary value were explicitly designated for my younger brother. I flipped through the remaining pages, looking for any additional provisions, perhaps a trust established for me or Jessica, or explanations for this decision. There were none. Just page after page, confirming that Logan would inherit everything my parents had worked for, everything I had helped them maintain and improve over the years. The date of the document kept flashing in my mind. 3 months ago. Not some outdated will from when we were children. Not before I had started supporting them financially. This was a recent, conscious decision made when they were fully aware of my contributions to their well-being. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the document heavy in my hands. My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure it could be heard throughout the house. I felt dizzy, disconnected from reality, as though I was observing myself from outside my body. Xavier, did you find the insurance papers? Mom's voice from the hallway snapped me back to the present. She appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. Her expression shifted when she saw what I was holding. Oh, she said, her voice suddenly uncertain. You found the wills. Yes, I managed to reply, my voice strangely calm despite the turmoil inside. I found them. Can you explain this to me, Mom? Why is everything going to Logan? She looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting away from mine. Let me get your father, she said, turning quickly and calling out, Richard, can you come here, please? Dad appeared moments later, his reading glasses perched on top of his head. He took in the scene and immediately understood the situation. Unlike Mom, he didn't seem embarrassed or surprised. Son, you weren't supposed to find that, he said, his voice steady. We were planning to discuss this with all of you at some point. Discuss what? I asked, still maintaining that unnatural calm. The fact that you've decided to leave everything to Logan? After all I've done to help you financially? It's not that simple, Dad said, leaning against the doorframe. You're successful, Xavier. You have a great job. You're responsible with money. You've built a solid future for yourself. Logan. Well, Logan needs more help. He's still finding his way. Mom nodded in agreement. We know you don't need our money, sweetheart. You'll be fine no matter what. Logan needs a safety net. The logic was so twisted, it left me speechless. I was being punished for my success, for my responsibility, for all the sacrifices I had made, and Logan was being rewarded for his chronic irresponsibility, for his failure to grow up and take care of himself. So all the money I've contributed, I said slowly, all the bills I've paid, the repairs I've funded, That counts for nothing? That's different, Mom said quickly. We appreciate everything you've done for us. This is just about what happens after we're gone. You're talking about the house I helped pay for, I pointed out. The house I spent $15,000 on last year for a new roof. The house I've contributed over $1,200 to every month for the mortgage. At that moment, Logan appeared in the hallway behind them, apparently having just arrived for dinner. His timing was impeccable, as always. What's going on? He asked, looking between us with mild curiosity. Your brother found the will, Dad explained. Logan's face registered understanding, then something like defensiveness. Oh, that. Look, Xavier. It's not a big deal. You make tons of money. Anyway, it's not like you need their house or whatever. His casual dismissal of the situation was the final straw. The calm I had been maintaining fractured, and anger rushed in to fill the void. Not a big deal? I've been supporting this family for years. I've paid bills, funded repairs, given up career opportunities to stay close. And this is how you all repay that loyalty? Now, son, Dad began, his tone placating. Let's not make this about money. Family is more important than that. Clearly not to you, I replied, standing up and placing the will back in its folder. If it was, you would recognize the family member who has actually been there for you, not the one who just shows up when it's convenient. I walked past them, through the living room, and toward the front door. Mom followed, distress clear on her face. Xavier. Wait. Aren't you staying for dinner? I made your favorite pot roast. I've lost my appetite, I said, not turning around. And apparently, I've lost a lot more than that. I left without another word. The sound of the front door closing behind me with a finality that seemed appropriate. In my car, I sat with my hands gripping the steering wheel, not yet starting the engine. My breathing was shallow, my chest tight with emotion. The betrayal felt physical, a weight pressing down on me, making it hard to move, to think. Eventually, I started the car and drove home, the familiar route now seeming alien and unfamiliar. Much like my relationship with my family had suddenly become. Back in my apartment, I found myself moving in a daze. I dropped my keys on the counter, walked to my home office, and opened the filing cabinet where I kept all my financial records. With mechanical precision, I pulled out the folder labeled Family Expenses and spread its contents across my desk. There they were, 5 years of my life quantified in receipts, bank statements, and payment confirmations. Mortgage contributions, medical bill payments, home repair invoices, travel expenses for their anniversary cruise, even grocery deliveries I'd set up during the worst of Dad's recovery. I started calculating, adding up the totals month by month, year by year. The numbers were staggering. In the past 5 years alone, I had contributed over $180,000 to my parents' well-being. That didn't include the countless hours spent researching doctors, coordinating repairs, setting up payment plans, or the emotional energy expended worrying about their financial stability, all while maintaining my own life and career. The career sacrifices suddenly seemed even more painful. The management position in San Francisco would have increased my salary by at least 40%, not to mention the career advancement opportunities. That single decision had cost me hundreds of thousands in potential earnings over the past few years. I had delayed buying my own home, instead funneling that down payment money into my parents' roof repair. I had taken on exhausting freelance projects to ensure there was extra money for Dad's cardiologist appointments. I poured myself a whiskey and sat by the window, watching the Chicago skyline as darkness fell. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom, asking if I was okay and when I would come back to talk. I didn't respond. I couldn't find words that wouldn't either escalate the situation or falsely minimize my feelings. Instead, I called my best friend Frank. Frank and I had been friends since college, and he knew my family situation well. He had often questioned my level of financial support for my parents, suggesting I was doing too much, but I had always defended my choices. "They did what?" Frank exclaimed after I explained the situation. "After everything you've done for them? That's messed up, Xavier." "I just don't understand," I said, my voice hollow. "I've always been there for them. Always. And this is how they repay that loyalty." "Some parents are like that," Frank said, his tone softening. "They take the reliable kid for granted and focus all their attention on the screw-up. They think you'll be fine no matter what because you've always handled everything so well. They think Logan needs them more than you do." His words struck a chord. "So I'm being punished for being responsible?" "Basically," Frank replied. "They're more worried about the child who needs them than the one who helps them. It's twisted, but common. They value the person who needs them, not the person they need." That perspective hit me like a physical blow. My parents valued Logan more because he needed them, depended on them. My independence and reliability had somehow diminished my value in their eyes rather than enhanced it. After talking with Frank, I called my sister Jessica. She answered immediately, her voice concerned. "Mom just called me," she said without preamble. "She said you found the will and left upset. Are you okay?" "Did you know about this?" I asked, unable to keep the accusation from my voice. "No," she said firmly. "I had no idea. I would have told you, Xavier. I would never keep something like that from you." I believed her. Jessica had always been straight with me, even when the truth was uncomfortable. "I just can't believe, after everything I've done, they would make this decision." Jessica sighed heavily. "There's something you should know. Logan, he talks about you when you're not around. Not in a good way." "What do you mean?" "He makes comments about how you think you're better than everyone else because of your job and money, how you hold your financial help over everyone's heads. It's not true, I always defend you, but I think he's been painting this picture to Mom and Dad for years." This new information stoked my anger further. "So he's been poisoning them against me while I've been paying their bills?" "I've tried to counter it," Jessica said. "But you know how persuasive Logan can be when he wants something. And he's there more often than either of us because he doesn't have a real job. More FaceTime means more influence." After hanging up with Jessica, my simmering anger boiled over. I grabbed the whiskey glass and hurled it against the wall, where it shattered spectacularly. The sound was satisfying, a physical manifestation of my fractured relationship with my family. The initial shock and hurt were evolving into something harder, colder. I had been used, taken advantage of, and then cast aside. The realization was both painful and liberating. For years, I had defined myself by my role as the responsible son, the family support system, the reliable one. That identity was now in question, and I needed to figure out who I was beyond those labels. I spent the next few days in a state of intense introspection, alternating between anger and analytical problem solving. I reviewed my bank statements again, calculating how much disposable income I would have if I stopped supporting my parents. The difference was substantial. I could increase my retirement contributions, accelerate my own home buying plans, perhaps even take that international vacation I'd been postponing for years. By the fourth day after discovering the will, I had made my decision. I logged into my online banking and systematically canceled all the automatic payments I had set up for my parents' expenses. The mortgage contribution, the utility bill payments, the grocery delivery service, the pharmacy auto pay for Dad's medications. One by one, I reclaimed my financial independence. Then I composed a carefully worded email to both my parents. Mom and Dad, after discovering your will and learning of your decision to leave all assets to Logan, I've been doing some serious thinking about my role in this family. For years, I have contributed financially to support you, often at significant personal sacrifice. I did this out of love and a sense of responsibility, believing my contributions were valued and appreciated. It's now clear that this was not the case. Your decision regarding the will makes it evident that my support has been taken for granted, perhaps even expected without acknowledgement of its significance. Therefore, I've made the difficult decision to discontinue my financial support effective immediately. I have canceled all automatic payments for your mortgage, utilities, medical bills, and other expenses I have been covering. You will need to make other arrangements for these obligations going forward. This is not a decision I've made lightly or out of spite. Rather, it's a recognition that I need to reevaluate the nature of our relationship and establish boundaries that reflect mutual respect. I will respect your decision regarding your assets, and I ask that you respect my decision regarding my finances. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about how we move forward from here, I am willing to listen. Xavier. I read the email several times before hitting send, making sure it reflected my thoughts clearly without being unnecessarily hurtful. This wasn't about punishment. It was about self-respect and establishing healthy boundaries. Still, my finger hesitated over the send button for several long moments before I finally committed to my decision. Once the email was sent, I felt a strange mixture of guilt and relief. The guilt stemmed from years of conditioning that I was responsible for my parents' well-being. The relief came from finally standing up for myself, from refusing to be taken for granted any longer. It was an unfamiliar feeling, but not an unpleasant one. For the first time in years, I felt like I was putting myself first. The first week after sending the email passed in suspicious silence. I had expected immediate reactions, desperate phone calls, angry texts. Instead, nothing. The silence was unnerving, making me check my phone constantly to make sure it was working properly. Had they not received my email? Were they so shocked they didn't know how to respond? Or were they simply waiting me out, assuming I would cave and resume payments when due dates approached? I stuck to my routine, throwing myself into work as a distraction. My colleagues noticed my distraction, but attributed it to a challenging project we were working on. Only my team lead, Mia, who had become something of a friend over the years, sensed something more was going on. "You sure you're okay?" she asked one afternoon after a meeting. "You seem somewhere else lately." I gave her a non-committal answer about family stress, which wasn't a lie but certainly wasn't the full truth. I wasn't ready to share the complete situation with people at work. It felt too raw, too personal, and frankly, a bit embarrassing. How do you explain to colleagues that your own parents value your irresponsible brother more than you? 9 days after my email, my phone finally rang with my mother's name on the caller ID. My heart rate jumped, and I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Xavier, honey," Mom replied, her tone suspiciously normal, as though nothing had happened. "How are you doing? We haven't heard from you in a while." "I'm fine," I said cautiously. "Did you get my email?" There was a brief pause before she answered. "Yes, we did. Your father and I have been talking about it." Another pause. "But that's not why I'm calling right now. The utility bill came today. It's $350. Can you transfer the money like you usually do? We're a little short this month." The audacity of the request left me momentarily speechless. She had acknowledged receiving my email, clearly stating I would no longer be covering their expenses. Yet here she was, asking as if nothing had changed. It was surreal. "Mom," I said slowly, making sure each word was clear. "I transferred money to Logan for the utilities. You should ask him about it." "Logan?" Her confusion seemed genuine. "Why would you send money to Logan? You've always taken care of the utilities." "Not anymore," I said firmly. "As I explained in my email, I'm no longer covering your expenses. Logan is your heir, so financial responsibilities should fall to him now." "But that doesn't make any sense," she protested, her voice rising slightly. "The will doesn't have anything to do with our current arrangements. That's for after we're gone. The will reflects how you value your children," I replied. "And I've adjusted my financial support to align with that valuation." Mom's voice took on an edge I rarely heard from her. "This isn't like you, Xavier. You've always been so reliable, so understanding." "Yes, I have been," I agreed. "And that reliability has been taken for granted. I'm sorry, Mom, but my decision stands. If you need help with bills, you should talk to Logan." She hung up without another word, which was unusual for her. Mom typically ended calls with, "I love you," or at least goodbye. The abrupt disconnection spoke volumes about her state of mind. Approximately 2 hours later, my father called. I had been expecting this follow-up. Dad was more direct than Mom, more likely to confront an issue head-on. I answered, bracing myself for the conversation. "What the hell is going on with you?" Dad demanded without preamble. "Your mother is upset. She says you're refusing to help with the bills anymore. That's not how we raised you." "Hello to you too, Dad," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. "And yes, that's correct. As I explained in my email, I'm no longer covering your expenses. This is how you treat your parents? After everything we've done for you?" His voice was rising with each word. "We put you through college, supported you, gave you a home, and now you're abandoning us over money?" The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. "I'm simply respecting the decision you and Mom made. You chose Logan as your heir, making it clear that he's your priority. So it makes sense that he should take on the financial responsibilities I've been handling." "Don't twist this around," Dad said sharply. "The will has nothing to do with our current situation. That's about the future, not about now." "It has everything to do with our current situation," I countered. "It shows me exactly where I stand in this family, despite years of financial support and sacrifices I've made for you both." "What sacrifices?" he asked, his tone dismissive. "You have a great job, plenty of money. Helping your parents isn't a sacrifice. It's what family does." That's when something inside me snapped. All the hurt, all the anger, all the feelings of betrayal came pouring out. "Sacrifice? Let me tell you about sacrifice, Dad. I turned down a promotion in San Francisco that would have increased my salary by 40% because I wanted to stay close to help you and Mom. I put off buying my own home so I could pay $15,000 to fix your roof last year. I work freelance jobs on weekends to make sure there's extra money for your medical bills. Don't you dare tell me I haven't sacrificed for this family." There was silence on the other end of the line. I had never spoken to my father this way before, never laid out so explicitly all I had done for them. The silence stretched on for several uncomfortable seconds. You saw the will," he finally said, his voice quieter now. "How did you find it?" "When I was looking for the insurance papers Mom asked for, it was in the same drawer." Another long pause. We didn't think you'd care about the will. You've always been so independent, so successful. We thought you'd understand that Logan needs more support. And what about what I need? I asked, my voice cracking slightly. Have you ever considered that maybe I've been supporting you because I thought my contributions mattered, that they were valued? Finding out that you plan to leave everything to Logan, after all I've done, tells me my support means nothing to you. That's not true, Dad protested, but his voice lacked conviction. We appreciate everything you do. We just thought, you thought wrong, I interrupted. And now, I'm making decisions based on what I know, not what I assumed. Logan is your heir, so Logan can help with your expenses from now on. I'm done. I ended the call before Dad could respond. My hands were shaking, my heart racing. I'd never confronted my father like that before, never laid bare my feelings so completely. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. The floodgates had opened. Over the next few days, my phone was bombarded with messages and calls. Logan texted repeatedly, alternating between anger and manipulation. Thanks for throwing me under the bus with Mom and Dad. Real mature. You know I can't afford to pay their bills. Stop being petty. Is this really about money? Or are you just jealous that they trust me more? I didn't respond to any of his messages. Jessica called to check on me, expressing concern about the family situation, but not pressuring me to change my mind. They're in a panic, she reported. They didn't realize how much they depended on your help until it was gone. Extended family members got involved as well. My Uncle Jack, Dad's brother, called to lecture me about family responsibility. Your parents raised you, gave you everything, he said sternly. This is how you repay them? By abandoning them when they need you? I simply replied, I suggest you ask them why they made the decisions they did before judging mine, and ended the call. Surprisingly, my Aunt Susan, Mom's older sister, took my side. Good for you, she said when she called. Margaret and Richard have always favored Logan. Even when you were kids, it's about time they realize they can't have it both ways, counting on your support while giving him all the rewards. The situation reached its climax exactly 1 month after I discovered the will. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom, and when I looked at the screen, the message was just 4 cold words. The mortgage is due. No greeting, no pleasantries, not even a question mark to soften the demand. Just a statement of fact, as though I was a payment processing service rather than her son. In that moment, all my remaining doubts about my decision vanished. This was exactly why I needed to establish boundaries. I was viewed not as a son to be loved, but as a financial resource to be used. I typed a simple 2-word reply, then put my phone away. Ask the heir. My response to Mom's text message seemed to open the floodgates to a torrent of reactions from my extended family. Word spread quickly, and soon I was fielding calls and messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months, even years. Uncle Jack, always Dad's staunchest supporter, left a scathing voicemail. Your father is beside himself. Is this really the son they raised? Someone who abandons his family over money? You should be ashamed, Xavier. Blood is thicker than water, and you're letting everyone down. I deleted the message without responding. Jack had always taken Dad's side in everything, never questioning, never seeing the other perspective. His opinion, while predictable, still stung. The surprise came from Aunt Susan, Mom's older sister. She called one evening as I was preparing dinner. Xavier, she said when I answered, her voice warm but firm. I heard about what's happening with you and your parents. Margaret called me crying yesterday. I braced myself for another lecture, but Susan surprised me. "I want you to know, I think you're doing the right thing, kiddo. It's about time someone stood up to them about how they treat you compared to Logan." "You do?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "Absolutely. I love my sister, but she and Richard have always had blinders on when it comes to that boy. They've taken your reliability for granted for years. Sometimes people need a wake-up call to recognize what they've been doing. You've given them that wake-up call." Her support was like a balm to my wounded spirit. At least someone in the family understood my perspective, recognized the imbalance that had existed for so long. "Thank you, Aunt Susan," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot right now." "Just hold your ground," she advised. "This isn't about being cruel. It's about respect. You deserve to be valued for all you've done, not just used as their personal ATM." After speaking with Susan, I decided it was time to get some professional advice. I made an appointment with Sarah Jameson, a family law attorney recommended by a colleague. I needed to understand my rights and responsibilities in this situation to ensure I was on solid legal ground. Sarah's office was sleek and modern, all glass and chrome with views of downtown Chicago. She was a woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that I appreciated. "Let me understand the situation," she said after I'd explained everything. "You've been providing substantial financial support to your parents voluntarily, with no formal agreement in place. Now you've discovered they've written a will leaving all their assets to your brother, and you've decided to discontinue this support. Is that accurate?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Do I have any legal obligation to continue supporting them?" She shook her head. "No, you don't. In Illinois, there are filial responsibility laws on the books, but they're rarely enforced. These laws could theoretically require adult children to support indigent parents, but your parents aren't indigent. They have assets, including their home and presumably some retirement income. Your support has been entirely voluntary." She leaned forward slightly. "That said, if you were to try to claim some of that money back, arguing it was given with the expectation of inheritance, you'd have a difficult case without documentation. Any chance you have written agreements about your financial contributions?" "No," I admitted. "It was all informal. Family helping family." "Then legally, those were gifts," she concluded. "But going forward, you're entirely within your rights to discontinue support. I would recommend documenting any conversations or agreements from this point on, just to protect yourself." The legal consultation gave me peace of mind. I wasn't abandoning any legal obligations. I was simply reclaiming agency over my own resources. The guilt that had lingered at the edges of my consciousness began to dissipate. Meanwhile, the practical consequences of my decision were beginning to manifest in my parents' lives. Jessica, who still visited them regularly, kept me updated. "Logan had to get a steady job," she told me during our weekly phone call. "He's working at Best Buy now. He hates it, but it's the only place that would hire him with his spotty work history." "Is he helping with the bills?" I asked. "Some," Jessica said. "Not as much as you did, obviously. He's only making minimum wage plus commission. But he's contributing something, which is a first. My parents were making adjustments as well. They sold Dad's car," Jessica reported. "They figure they only need one vehicle between them, now that they're both retired. And they canceled that cruise they were planning for spring break. Mom was disappointed, but she understands they need to economize. These changes didn't give me pleasure exactly, but they did provide a sense of validation. My financial support had been enabling a lifestyle they couldn't actually afford. More importantly, It had been enabling Logan's continued irresponsibility. Without my safety net, everyone was being forced to face reality and make appropriate adjustments. Jessica sent me a text a few weeks later that caught me by surprise. Just wanted you to know, I'm proud of you. What you did took courage. I wish I'd had the backbone to set boundaries years ago. Her message meant more to me than she probably realized. Jessica had always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts rather than creating them. Her approval of my actions reinforced my confidence that I had made the right decision, difficult though it had been. With the family drama at least temporarily stabilized, I began to focus more on my own life and future. The resources I had been directing toward my parents were now available for my own goals and dreams. I updated my resume and applied for a senior developer position within my company, one that came with a substantial salary increase and more responsibility. The interview process was rigorous, but my years of steady performance and the additional skills I'd gained through freelance work paid off. I was offered the position with a 30% salary bump that would have been unthinkable when I was supporting my parents. I also began looking at real estate. After years of renting, I was finally in a position to consider buying my own home. I worked with a realtor to find properties in neighborhoods I liked, attended open houses on weekends, and started the pre-approval process for a mortgage. The excitement of planning my own future on my own terms was invigorating. My social life expanded as well. Without the obligation of Sunday dinners at my parents' house, I found myself free to accept invitations I would have declined in the past. I reconnected with old friends, joined a rock climbing gym, and even started dating again. Claire, a project manager who had left our company the previous year, reached out about a work question, and our professional conversation evolved into coffee, then dinner, then regular dating. You seem different from when we worked together, she observed during our third date. More relaxed, more confident. I smiled, considering her observation. I think I am different. I've made some changes in my life, set some boundaries that were long overdue. It looks good on you, she said, raising her wine glass in a small toast. Here's to healthy boundaries. I also started seeing a therapist, Dr. Mitchell, to help process the complex emotions surrounding my family situation. In our sessions, I explored the roots of my need to be the responsible caretaker, the guilt I still sometimes felt for withdrawing support, and the anger that still flared occasionally when I thought about the will. What you're describing is a common dynamic in families, Dr. Mitchell explained. The reliable child often becomes the emotional and financial support for the entire family system, while the less reliable child receives more attention and resources precisely because they're seen as needing more help. Breaking that pattern is difficult and often met with resistance, but it's essential for your own well-being. We worked on strategies for maintaining my boundaries while dealing with the inevitable guilt trips and manipulation that might come from my family. Role-playing potential conversations helped me prepare for various scenarios, strengthening my resolve to stand firm in my decision. A conversation with my colleague Raj during lunch one day helped crystallize my new perspective. Raj had gone through a divorce the previous year and had spoken openly about the challenges of establishing new boundaries with his ex-wife. The hardest part, he told me, was realizing that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's actually an act of self-respect. And honestly, it's better for both people in the long run, even if it doesn't feel that way at first. His words resonated deeply. What I had done wasn't about punishing my parents or brother. It was about respecting myself enough to refuse to be taken for granted. It was about recognizing my own worth and insisting that others recognize it too. The relief I felt was profound. For years, I had carried the weight of financial responsibility for my parents, worrying about their mortgage, their medical bills, their repairs and expenses. That burden had been lifted, not just from my bank account, but from my psyche as well. I slept better, laughed more easily, and felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since college, I was living solely for myself, making decisions based on my own needs and desires rather than factoring in how they would affect my ability to support my family. It was both exhilarating and a little terrifying, this newfound freedom. But with each passing week, I grew more comfortable in my new reality, more confident in my decision to prioritize my own well-being. 3 months passed quickly. Winter settled over Chicago, bringing snow and bitter winds that made my morning commute a challenge. But inside my newly purchased condo, with its modern kitchen and view of the city skyline, I was building a life that felt authentically mine. Claire had become a regular presence, bringing warmth and perspective I hadn't realized I was missing. My new position at work challenged me intellectually and offered opportunities for growth I'd previously put on hold. The relative peace was interrupted one evening by a call from Jessica. "Hey," she said when I answered. Her voice carrying a note of concern I recognized immediately. "I thought you should know what's happening with Mom and Dad." I sat down, preparing myself for whatever news she was about to deliver. "What's going on?" "It's not good," she sighed. "Logan isn't stepping up the way they expected. He's contributing some money, but nowhere near what they need. He's already quit the Best Buy job, said the manager was out to get him, whatever that means. Now he's doing delivery driving, but his car keeps breaking down." "What about their finances?" I asked, feeling a twinge of worry despite myself. "They've had to dip into their retirement savings," Jessica reported. "Dad's medical bills keep coming, and without your help, they're struggling to keep up. The house needs some repairs they're putting off, and I think the tension is getting to them. Mom snapped at me last weekend over nothing, which isn't like her." I processed this information silently. Part of me felt vindicated that my parents were experiencing the natural consequences of their decisions. Another part, the son who had cared for them for so long, felt a pull of concern. "There's something else," Jessica added. "Logan and Dad had a huge fight yesterday. Logan promised to help with the property tax bill, but then spent the money on some gaming system instead. Dad called him irresponsible, and Logan stormed out saying they were too demanding and should ask you for help if they were so desperate. That evening, I received an unexpected call from my mother. Seeing her name on my phone screen sent a jolt of anxiety through me, but I answered nonetheless. "Xavier," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "How are you, son?" "I'm fine, Mom," I replied cautiously. "How are you and Dad?" There was a pause, followed by a shaky breath. "We're managing," she said, then added with unexpected honesty, "but it's been harder than we expected. Without your help, well, we didn't realize just how much we relied on you until it was gone." The admission surprised me. I had expected continued demands or guilt trips, not this acknowledgement of my contributions. "I owe you an apology," she continued, her voice cracking slightly. "We took you for granted. All those years, all that support you provided, we just came to expect it without truly appreciating what it meant, what you were sacrificing." I remained silent, letting her speak. This was the conversation I had wanted for months. "The will," she said hesitantly. "When we updated it, we weren't thinking about all you've done. We were just worried about Logan, about what would happen to him if something happened to us. We never meant to hurt you or make you feel unvalued." "But you did hurt me," I replied, my voice steady. Finding that will, after years of supporting you and Dad, it felt like a slap in the face, like none of my contributions mattered. I see that now, Mom admitted. And I'm truly sorry. We made a mistake, Xavier. A terrible mistake. Her apology was sincere. I could hear it in her voice. For the first time since discovering the will, I felt a small crack in the wall I had built around my heart. The next day, I received a separate call from my father. This was unusual. Dad typically let Mom handle family communications. "Son," he began, his voice gruff with emotion. "I've been doing some thinking about the will, about everything that's happened. I want you to know I was wrong." Coming from my father, this admission was unprecedented. Dad had always been proud, resistant to admitting mistakes or showing vulnerability. When we made Logan the sole beneficiary, we weren't thinking clearly, he continued. We were focused on his struggles, his needs. We took your stability for granted, assumed you didn't need anything from us, because you've always been so capable. He paused, clearing his throat. The truth is, we put more value on Logan because he seemed to need us more. We didn't recognize how much we needed you, how much we depended on your support. It wasn't fair, and I'm sorry. His words echoed what Frank had told me months ago about parents valuing the child who needs them over the one they need. Hearing my father acknowledge this pattern was both painful and healing. "Would you be willing to meet with us?" Dad asked. "All of us, including Logan and Jessica. We need to talk face to face. Try to find a way forward." I considered the request carefully. "I'm willing to meet." I finally agreed. "But I need you to understand that things can't go back to the way they were before. I can't be the family ATM anymore." "I understand," Dad said solemnly. "That's not what we're asking for." We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a restaurant downtown that none of us frequented regularly. I arrived first, deliberately early, to compose myself. Jessica arrived next, giving me a supportive hug before taking the seat beside me. Mom and Dad came together, both looking older and more tired than I remembered. Logan was last, sliding into his chair with a guarded expression. The initial minutes were awkward, filled with stilted small talk about the weather and the restaurant's decor. Finally, Dad cleared his throat and addressed the elephant in the room. "We asked for this meeting because our family has been fractured, and we need to repair the damage," he began. "Xavier, when you discovered the will and decided to withdraw your financial support, it forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about how we've been operating as a family." Mom nodded in agreement. "We've relied on you too heavily, expected too much without giving enough in return. We took advantage of your reliability, your generosity." Logan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "And I've been unfair too," he admitted, surprising me with his candor. "I've resented you for your success, instead of appreciating how much you've helped our parents. I've said things behind your back that I shouldn't have." Jessica spoke up. "We all played a role in this situation. I should have spoken up sooner about the imbalance I was seeing, not just tried to keep the peace at all costs." I looked around the table at my family, seeing them with new clarity. "I need you all to understand something," I said carefully. "This was never just about money or inheritance. It was about feeling valued, about having my contributions recognized rather than taken for granted. When I saw that will, it confirmed a fear I hadn't even acknowledged to myself, that despite everything I'd done, I was somehow less important in this family." Dad reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but making the gesture. "We understand that now, and we want to make changes, real changes, not just in the will, but in how we relate to each other." "What kind of changes?" I asked, cautious but hopeful. We've already contacted our lawyer about revising the will, Mom explained. We want to divide our assets equally among all three of you. It's the fair thing to do, and I'm committed to supporting myself, Logan added. I've got a new job at a tech retail store, full-time with benefits. I'm finally growing up, taking responsibility. We also want to establish clear expectations about family finances moving forward, Dad said. No more assumptions, no more taking anyone for granted. I considered their words carefully. I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm willing to work on rebuilding our relationship. But I need to be clear about my boundaries. I'm open to helping in emergencies, but I won't return to paying your monthly bills or covering Logan's responsibilities. That's more than fair, Mom agreed quickly. We're not asking you to take on those burdens again. We just want our son back in our lives. For the first time in months, I felt a genuine connection with my family. Not the old dynamic based on financial dependence and unspoken expectations, but something potentially healthier, more balanced. I'd like that too, I said honestly. But it will take time. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. We spent the next hour discussing practical matters, the revision of the will, a fair division of any financial responsibilities for our parents, and clear communication guidelines moving forward. Logan committed to maintaining his job and contributing his share. Jessica offered to coordinate medical appointments and insurance matters, tasks she could manage with her teaching schedule. I agreed to help with financial planning and investment decisions, utilizing my skills without opening my wallet as the default solution. As we prepared to leave, Dad pulled me aside. I want you to know something, he said quietly. This situation, as painful as it's been, has taught me something important. You're not valuable to us because of what you can provide. You're valuable because you're our son, and we love you. I'm sorry it took this crisis for me to see that clearly. His words were exactly what I had needed to hear for so long. Not promises of inheritance or financial arrangements, but simple acknowledgement of my intrinsic worth as his son, separate from what I could do for the family. Thank you, Dad, I replied, emotion making my voice rough. That means a lot. We embraced briefly, awkwardly, but sincerely. It wasn't a magical resolution to all our issues, but it was a genuine step toward healing. 1 year later, I stood in my condo looking out at the Chicago skyline, reflecting on how much had changed. The previous 12 months had been a journey of redefinition, not just for me, but for my entire family. The transformation hadn't been easy or straightforward, but it had been necessary and ultimately healing. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something I'd never experienced before. A balanced, adult connection based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. We still had Sunday dinners, but now they rotated between our homes, with everyone contributing to the meal. Dad and I had developed a shared interest in photography, spending time together on weekend photo walks through the city. Mom and I had our regular coffee dates where we talked about books, current events, anything except money. These new traditions felt healthier, more genuine than our previous interactions. I still helped my parents, but in different ways. I'd set up a proper budget spreadsheet for them and taught them how to use it. When Dad needed a new computer, I researched options and went shopping with him instead of simply buying it for him. When their water heater failed, I helped them compare quotes and negotiate with contractors rather than just writing a check. I was a resource, a support, but no longer their financial safety net. The revised will had been finalized, with assets divided equally among the 3 children. But truthfully, that document had become far less important to me than it once was. The real value was in the acknowledgement of my place in the family, the recognition of my contributions, and the establishment of healthier dynamics moving forward. Logan had surprised everyone, perhaps even himself. He had maintained his job at the tech store for 10 months now, the longest he'd ever held a position. He'd moved into his own apartment, modest but entirely self-supported. He still struggled sometimes, still made impulsive decisions, but he was learning, growing, taking responsibility in ways I'd never thought possible. "Your withdrawing support was the best thing that could have happened to me," he confessed, during a rare moment of vulnerability at Jessica's birthday dinner. "It forced me to step up, to grow up. I resented you for it at first, but now I'm grateful." Jessica and I had grown closer through the family crisis. As the middle child who had often been overlooked in the drama between Logan and me, she had found her voice, becoming more assertive about her own needs and boundaries. We met for lunch regularly, just the two of us, building the adult-sibling relationship we'd never fully developed before. My own healing journey had been complex. The initial anger and hurt had slowly given way to understanding, then forgiveness, not just of my family, but of myself. I had carried guilt for abandoning my parents, for prioritizing my needs, for disrupting the family system. Working through those feelings with my therapist had been essential to my healing process. The early stages were the hardest, I explained to Claire one evening as we prepared dinner in my kitchen. Claire and I had become serious, recently getting engaged after 9 months of dating. She had been an unexpected gift in my life, a partner who understood boundaries and healthy relationships in ways my family never had. I'd spent so many years defining myself as the responsible one, the provider, I continued, chopping vegetables while she stirred the sauce. When I stepped away from that role, I had to figure out who I was beyond that identity. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. Claire nodded, understanding as always. "That's what I love about you," she said. "You had the courage to value yourself enough to say no, even when it would have been easier to maintain the status quo. Not many people have that kind of strength." Her words touched me deeply. Throughout my life, I had seen my tendency to take care of others as both a virtue and a burden, but rarely as a choice that required courage. Claire's perspective helped me reframe my actions as strength rather than selfishness. The financial changes in my life had been significant as well. Without the constant drain of supporting my parents, I had been able to build substantial savings, invest more aggressively for retirement, and still enjoy a lifestyle that included occasional travel and other pleasures I'd previously denied myself. My condo, purchased with the down payment I'd saved once I stopped paying my parents' expenses, had become a true home, a space that reflected my tastes and priorities. My career had flourished too. The promotion I'd accepted after stepping back from family obligations had led to further advancement. I now led a team of developers, a role that utilized not just my technical skills, but also the emotional intelligence and boundary setting I had learned through my family experiences. The most profound change, however, had been internal. I had learned to value myself independently of what I could provide for others. I had discovered that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary for healthy relationships. I had realized that true generosity came from choice, not obligation, and that allowing others to face the consequences of their decisions was sometimes the most loving action possible. These lessons hadn't come easily. There had been painful conversations, sleepless nights, moments of doubt and backsliding. There had been times when I questioned my decision, when the ingrained patterns of family dynamics pulled at me like gravity. But with each challenge, each difficult conversation, each boundary maintained, the new patterns became stronger, more natural. I used to think love meant sacrifice, I told Claire, as we sat on the balcony after dinner, watching the city lights come alive. I thought proving my worth meant giving until it hurt, especially to family. Now I understand that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's dependence, or obligation, or fear disguised as devotion. She squeezed my hand, her engagement ring catching the light. What you did took incredible courage. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean you love your family any less. If anything, it creates the possibility for a more authentic relationship. She was right. The relationship I now had with my parents was more honest, more equal, and in many ways more loving than what we had before. We saw each other more clearly, valued each other more genuinely, and interacted more authentically without the distortion of financial dependence. My journey had taught me that sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with those we love most, that occasionally relationships need to break before they can be rebuilt on healthier foundations, that true family connections are based on mutual respect and recognition, not just blood ties or financial support. Sometimes saying no is the greatest gift you can give to your loved ones and to yourself, because it's only when we're valued for who we are, not what we provide, that we can experience the true meaning of family. And it's only when we respect ourselves enough to establish boundaries that others learn to respect us too. What's your experience with family and financial boundaries? Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your self-worth? Drop a comment below to share your story, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life experiences that might help you navigate your own family challenges. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for healthy relationships and your own well-being. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength and clarity on your own journey.